Today I'm going to show you how I build two different styles of top bars for my top bar hives using a table saw. It's so easy. Let's go. First things first, the safety stuff. We are using a table saw to make cuts that don't go all the way through the timber, so all safety guards have to be removed. If you need to push timber through the saw, use an offcut or something. Don't put your hands near the blade. That'd be stupid. And don't forget your lung, eye and ear protection anytime you're doing a job like this. The timber I'm using is 42mm by 42mm pine. The critical dimension of top bars is the width, which is 38mm. If you can find something closer to 38, then use that. But I'm going to have to cut mine to size as I go. This is the end profile of the two types of bars we'll be building today. The first is your typical V-style that you see in most top bar hives. And the second is very similar to another type of bar that's commonly used, where people will cut a slot in the bar and use a paddle pop stick or a small strip of foundation to create the top bar guide, except this one's made out of a single piece of timber. The first thing we need to do is cut our timber to length. The top bars in my hives are 430mm long. Yours may vary depending on what plans you've used to build your hive, so just double check that before you cut your timber to length. For both the styles of bars we'll be building today, we'll be leaving 20 to 22mm of timber as the top of the bar. This will be enough to make the bars strong enough to hold the weight of the comb, as well as provide enough insulation for our climate. If you live in a colder or hotter area, you may need to make them thicker. It's all down to personal situation. This next step is completely optional, but well worth doing. It provides an additional comb guide, but in the vertical dimension, and it's as simple as drilling one hole and gluing in a length of dowel. So find the 38mm side of your top bar and mark the center, both lengthways and widthways. Then just drill a hole that matches the size of the dowel you're using. In this case I'm using 6mm. It's much easier to get the hole vertical while the bar is still square, so that's why it's done at this stage. The next thing we need to do is mark out the profile of the bar we want to create. Just make sure you keep that 38mm side as the top and bottom of the bar. The dimensions are critical. Allow 20 or so millimeters at the top for strength, then roughly mark out the profile you want to achieve. We also need to mark the side profile. We'll do one horizontal cut to create the lip that sits on the edges of the hive, then an angled cut at the same angle as the hive sides to provide clearance. The exact depth and angle of these cuts will depend on your own hive and what plans you've used, so you'll just have to measure it with a tape measure and work it out. Once I've marked everything up, I can get ready to make some cuts. I start by cutting out the end pieces, as it's easier to do while I still have a flat surface on the bottom of the bar. I angle the blade over to where I want it and position the fence to where I know I won't cut enough timber off. That way I can work my way in to the correct position. I do this with all of the cuts. That way it's easier to adjust the blade angle a little if you're not quite right, or adjust the position of the fence to make sure you get the cuts in the right spot. I continue to slowly adjust the blade and fence position until it's exactly where it needs to be. Once I'm happy with it, all the bars can be run through one after another. It seems a bit time consuming to get it set up, but once it's in position, it's very, very efficient. You can crank out a lot of bars very quickly. From there, it's just a matter of repeating that process for all the angles that you need to cut. I like to start with the angles on the bottom, cut the V of the bar or the little straight section depending on which style of bar you're using. Just go slow with your adjustments, just moving everything a little bit at a time, and you'll avoid cutting into timber that you don't want to cut. And as you can see, once you've got the fence and the blade in the correct position, you end up with a very symmetrical, very neat top bar guide. I then do the cuts along the sides, and this will expose the comb guide. Now it's starting to look like a top bar. Only a couple more cuts to go. Those cuts are on the ends. Stand the bar up on its end and cut to the depth of the first angled cut that we put in the bar. If you opted for the vertical comb guide, now you can just take some wood glue and your pre-cut lengths of dowel. I like to push the dowel in through the top of the bar and then just put a little bit of wood glue on the very top of the dowel and then pull it through. My reason for thinking that is that it just keeps any of the glue outside of the hive. Whether that makes any difference at all, I have no idea, but we try to keep the chemicals out of the hive as much as we can, so that's why I do it that way. And that's it. That's how I make my one-piece top bars. They're fairly simple. They are quick to make if you're making quite a few of them. If you're making one or two, it'd be fairly time consuming, I think, to do it this way, but if you're making 20 or 30 at a time, it works out fairly quick. And I'm trialing the two different styles of guides. At the moment I'm leaning towards the thin vertical guide, but I'll do a bit more testing with them and I'll make a video about that later on. So let me know how you make your top bars and what you found to be the best design. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.